everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. We have a real treat in store for you. Just Kyle and I today, and for a full hour. So back to somewhat of a normal flow for these Solidarity Friday episodes, and let's see where it goes. Yeah. So, Kyle, how's the day going in New Jersey?
Pretty good. It's a little bit warm out. Got out for a nice little 30-minute bike ride earlier, which was nice. So
nice.
All good.
Yeah.
Wish it was snowboarding, but I guess we're still waiting for the snow here.
Someday. Yeah, it's coming. We're getting some wild weather in Colorado. 100-mile-an-hour winds in Denver today.
Damn.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be stuck outside for a few hours earlier.
Is that
on
normal?
account of high winds.
Sounds like hurricane gusts.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
It's hope everybody's okay down there. I'm sure there's going to be some damage though, unfortunately. Cool. So yeah, before we get rolling, everybody knows already, but we'll say it again. In just a few short weeks, we kick off Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists. That starts January 6th. It's a class we've been teaching for a while. In this round, we might be approaching 500 students, right? Like who have
Probably
been through the program. Yeah.
Getting close there, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really proud of it. It's been a source of great joy for me teaching it. And I think people get so much out of it. Not only the networking, but they get to actually see how other people are operating in the space for their own issues and interests, and get to explore what use cases might be good for them at the same time as you're learning about all the fundamentals, and not only from basic soup to nuts, but also clinician level material. Yeah, so it's a 9-week course kicking off on Thursday, January 6th. It's a Thursday specific course. There's 2 time zones you can join, 2 different groups you could join. I believe the earlier one is about to sell out. So if you're in the UK, EU, you want to join us, there's probably limited seats left for that one, but a bunch more seats available for the later one. So feel free to come on out. Psychedelicstoday.com. If you want to read more about it, if you have questions, email us info@psychedelicstoday.com. I just noticed listening to the Ryan Zurer episode you did, Kyle, that they use hello at. I think we want to. I'm now wanting to transition it. They are.
They
Vine.
are. Yeah, a lot of people do
I think
that.
I want to do that. I never seen that before, and I feel like it's a great catch-all.
Yeah.
You don't need to be screwing around with so many different emails anymore. Yeah, who knows? We'll see how it shakes out, but I'm curious. Cool. So again, psychedelicstoday.com for more on that one, or info@psychedelicstoday.com if you have questions. We'll have a bunch of live streams and webinars. You can join with me if you want to, ask questions directly. I'm doing them essentially daily. Got one right after this, I think.
Nice.
And they're actually really fun. It's just like, me and maybe 1 to 4 other people just, talking about psychedelic education generally. What are the options? Why is ours cool? And all that. Yeah. So, anything else we want to share about beyond the class?
No, I think that's
Cool.
probably it. Yeah, we'd love to have you. So
awesome.
If you haven't signed up yet,
Yeah.
take the plunge.
Yep. I promise it's a good time. Yeah. So, and what is it? 30-day refund period or something, or 15?
30, I believe.
30. Sweet. So yeah, if you hate it, you get a refund 30 days. So very low risk for you. And yeah, it's just a great way for you to join our kind of community of alumni and people doing really cool work in the world. Yeah. All right. So I think the topic for this first part is microdosing. And then we'll kind of chat about some other things as we run out of steam on microdosing. So it's quite a topic. It's probably second only to investors and like capitalists in the space. Is the next up topic is microdosing in terms of highly debated, really interesting topics, right? So microdosing, typically when I describe it, I'm saying a sub-perceptual dose. But you and I recorded with Fadiman, and he kind of reframed it, right? Where it's like you might feel it a little bit, but you're certainly not high. You don't have any problems getting through your day. Any other qualifiers you remember him using?
I don't remember that. But yeah, I mean, I typically kind of describe it as subperceptual. So you're not getting to that threshold dose. But I know maybe there are some people that are getting right to that threshold dose and maybe still calling it microdosing.
Yeah. And what I recall him revising is that 7 micrograms is what he published in his book as being the microdose for LSD. I think he upped it to 10 based on what he's seen in the field since then. So that's quite interesting. So 1/10 of a hit of LSD, typically speaking. But I learned from Hamilton Morris the number one thing you can say about a piece of acid blotter is that it is not 100 micrograms. The safest assumption is it is not 100 micrograms. And
did he give you an average?
No, he didn't even. Because there's so much diversity in method of what they call laying the LSD on the paper. And diversity of technique, diversity of source material, all that kind of stuff. So it's in degradation over time, heat, time, humidity, pressure, all that can really impact it. So it's a delicate molecule. So it's hard math is the answer, is the thing I want to bring up. It's not an easy calculation given we don't have a safe supply of LSD. Some Canadians had access to this 1P LSD for a while. It might still be available in Canada and in Europe. If it's made in the right facility, kind of GMP type practices, you can somewhat be rest assured that it's 100. But it's a hard guess. So anyway, you got to figure out your own dosing. Well, I guess let's dig in. Like, what do you think people are doing microdosing for, Kyle?
I mean, when I chat with people, it's mostly for, mental health wellness, right? Some people are on kind of the cognitive enhancement side, creativity. And then the people that really just want to help their depression and anxiety, right? So really trying to help out with anything that they're really struggling with. So I think there's those two camps, right? I think maybe back when we thought about microdosing, it was first becoming like a hot topic. It was really kind of associated with like the Silicon Valley cognitive enhancing type of use case. But yeah, there's a lot of people that are finding benefit for their depression and anxiety.
Right. And those are, probably the most common use cases, right? Like doing better at work or creatively, and then also for wellness purposes. And I find that really interesting, but it's wellness. People are typically doing it for anxiety, depression, kind of somewhat, I don't want to call them simple indications, but, somewhat more basic or regular medical indications, right? And I think there's a lot more possible applications. And what we see in the popular press is often studies saying, oh, microdosing is amazing, or, oh, look at this study yet again, no great evidence. I think there's a happy medium to be found here. And what is that? It's an interesting one. It's how do we want to think about it? So, when these studies come out, I think they're researching a limited number of variables, which, it's kind of pretty typical in science, right? Because you kind of have to limit your variables, and you can't look at everything. So, the story's not been fully told yet. This is still early days in psychedelic research. If you feel like you have a conclusion, you might be jumping the gun, right? Like we're about to, or already did, publish this article. I forget the title. It's something along the lines of "Microdosing is bullshit." But it's a great
that's going to ruffle some feathers.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. But I want to have somebody like write a rebuttal or a commentary on it to say, oh, well, it's not exactly bullshit because of these reasons. And, this thing needs to be a long conversation. This isn't one study and done, right? Because, those guys did that self-blinded, self-reported study with a lot of samples. Like, that's not the end of the story. That's the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
We have to recall the drug war put us in a position where we could not easily do this research for decades and decades. So,
yeah, and I think a lot of the microdosing research is really kind of citizen science. There's recently just a larger study of 8,500 people from 75 countries. That was by folks over at UBCO, and they're also doing citizen science, right? People are kind of just self-reporting what's going. So, it's self-selected. I think for us to really figure this out, we're probably going to have to do a little bit more rigorous type of investigation and research if it is beneficial for some people.
And, if we look at the David Nutt harm scale, and, this is the thing that was published in The Lancet years ago showing alcohol being really dangerous and harmful, and then LSD and psilocybin being really minimally risky and harmful. They are the safest on his chart out of all the compounds. So if people are getting a benefit from microdosing LSD or psilocybin, fine, right? Like, even if it's placebo, fine.
That's how I feel about it.
Right? Like, the risk profile is so low. There is conversation about this, the thickening of the heart valve thing, the 5-HT2A thing, coming from
2B.
2B, coming from fen-phen, and people were having serious heart issues, but they were consuming a lot of this compound. Some people were dying and having a heart attack. So because there's activation on those receptor sites from psilocybin and LSD, people theorize that there could therefore be some cardiac risk from microdosing. I don't really go there. I think if there was going to be this risk, we would know about it by now, given the, I hate to say it like this, chronic use, very serious overuse of LSD in the 60s and 70s. And people were using it daily at really high doses. I remember Amanda Fielding on stage at Horizons talking about her dosing daily for a long time. Wow. And it was a really high dose, really, really high dose. So she would have cardiac issues theoretically if this was a deal. So there's a lot of people at the sweet spot for heart disease right now, age-wise, like boomers, and they're not showing it. So I think that's minimal. Do you kind of feel similarly on that one?
Yeah, I guess we probably hear some stuff, but I guess I wouldn't completely rule it out, right? And we were looking at, it came from fen-phen, so a totally different molecule to some degree, right?
Way bigger dose too.
Yeah,
we're talking micrograms or milligrams versus like grams.
Yeah, and what other factors were playing there, right? Was it just the 2B receptor?
Did they factor in steroids? These pro athletes? I don't know. It's a great question.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. Other drugs the pro athletes were using before they were having this. Like, good portion of them were probably on really weird experimental drugs that athletes like to use so they can stay competitive, right? I didn't even think about that one, so thank you. Right, we can't totally rule it out, but what are the odds? And since we've got no real reports coming from psychedelics, one thing I've seen, and this came up in the conference we ran the other day with Psychedelics Now, was that regulators are really nervous when there is this kind of activation on those receptor sites on account of that fen-phen risk. So companies and researchers are going to have to really look at that if we're doing kind of long-term dosing with these things, right?
Right, yeah.
At smaller doses.
Yeah. And it would be interesting to try to do some research on, heart valve thickening of microdose users to try to get some of that data. But yeah,
it's actually pretty easy. Yeah. Med students should pick that up if you have access to some ultrasounds and cardiac imaging devices and MRIs and whatnot. Throw people who have been microdosing for 2 to 4 years in a thing and compare it to healthy normal hearts.
Right.
You could do a controlled study if you wanted to, but.
Yeah, and I guess it just comes down to anything in excess, right? Is taking anything in excess for a long period of time good for the body? It's Probably not, right? I think it is healthy to take breaks with things. And, do people end up using microdosing as a crutch and then it turns into, a multiple time week thing for many years? And does that have long-term impact? I think it's too early to say, but, things
Agreed.
to consider.
Yeah. And, generally speaking, I think it's safe enough where I'm not going to tell people to do it, daily, like the Stamets stack. Like I like the Fadiman protocol where it's spaced out in 6-week chunks and you take 2 weeks off, and like that seems healthier and safer to me. So it's not only the drug, it's the protocol and the way you're doing it too, route of administration, etc. So there's a lot of complicated stuff to get into around it. So, next up, are we just looking at anxiety? Are we just looking at something as basic as a PHQ, like a kind of scorecard for mental wellness generally, right? You use this in the clinic, right? PHQ?
Yeah, we use the PHQ-9. My dyslexia always wants to switch those letters up.
That'll happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really basic scorecard, and you score things 1 out of 6 or 7 or something. Just go down the chart and you add them up. I recently did it. I scored really low, and then I kept thinking about it. I was like, maybe I was a little cavalier when I was writing that down. So, like, scoring's always a funny thing. So
Yeah,
I think with psychology, the great thing is they're spreading it out over a large sample set, so it helps to account for that. Sometimes, not always. Yeah, like people are publishing.
But yeah, I mean, again,
with
with
8 people,
like,
right?
Yeah, I was just chatting with somebody about just using tests and measures. Like, on the client end, are they scoring things sometimes to please the clinician, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to like always be so truthful here. And, even that, I think sometimes you have to use with a grain of salt how people are actually scoring that stuff. Are they actually being truthful?
Right. And, what are their intentions? And is it to please you? Is it to score drugs? What is it? William Burroughs had a whole thing about, the doctor being the asshole that you had to trick into giving you the drugs you wanted. So you had to like plan out your script and conversation ahead of time. So people are still doing this. Yeah, I wish I was better at it. I'm not. really, really bad at it. Like, please, I can't sleep. Give me Ambien. No. I'm like, okay, great. I'm going to use cannabis. No, you're an asshole if you use cannabis. Great. All right. I guess I'll figure it out on my own then. So, things like that are interesting. And we need to, look at that when it comes to how doctors are going to be and, clinicians are going to be operating. So there's so many factors that could be coming here when we're microdosing, right? Like, yes, maybe your anxiety improves, maybe your depression. What other things could be improved, right? Like if you put it in the shamanic context, like you are deepening your relationship with that thing, whatever that thing is. If you're microdosing, pine needles, for instance, to like come closer to pine needles and like have some sort of relationship there. Like you could do a dieta on that. Your own neo-shamanic, roll your own kind of ritual to like understand your own environment. If you're applying kind of Amazonian shamanism to North America, like that's one way you could do it. People are microdosing ayahuasca vine, capi, iboga, just about anything you can imagine they're microdosing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and it makes me wonder. I mean, I always come back to this with like microdosing, and it'd be interesting to like get some data around somebody's day. How are they actually creating their day? Are they, starting off with an intention that this is going to help them? They, are putting a lot of like value on it. Are they doing any meditation once they, take their microdose? Are they engaging in any sort of, ritual, anything to enhance that? And so I always come back to really think, what other variables are at play here? Right. There's those days when I'm really struggling and then I go do something like taking a bike ride or just getting out and doing that type of ritual thing. I'm like, oh, that's all I really needed for today. But I think maybe with ingesting a substance to some degree, maybe it also helps to set the stage for that as well. Of going, I'm going to, take this dose and engage in this activity. I'm going to sit down and do my daily meditation and journaling. And so, what type of role do those other extracurricular activities play in enhancing well-being? So I'd just be interested to hear about, people that are engaging in microdosing. What other activities are you engaging in? And how does that kind of tweak the variable a little bit as well? Is it the microdosing or is it actually the whole day and the activities that you're engaging in, your mindset around this is going to be helpful for me?
Right. That's a good call. I think this is perhaps why there's a whole microdosing coaching industry right now, because you have somebody to help coach you through this whole thing. It's not therapy, it's coaching. And you're getting support like, hey, but like, what was your excuse on why you didn't journal? What was your excuse for not meditating today, or whatever it is, right? Not everybody needs to meditate, though it is nice. But yeah, like what additional value is offered there? I've never had a microdosing coach. I know some of them. Almost every microdosing coach I've met, I actually personally like a lot. I can't speak to the value of their work, but I tend to think it's high. And, coaches alone, but it's like coach plus placebo. Like coaches alone do pretty decent for people. I hate to say life coach because it feels like kind of horrible, but it's kind of true. Like it's a general coaching thing but you can contract with them to do anything. Like, all right, yeah, I'd like to do more sit-ups in a couple months, or like, I want to have more regular practices. Can you help me figure that out?
Yeah.
But then you throw in this kind of like substance. It could be placebo. It could be active in some ways. Like, after talking to Fadiman, I'm like, these doses are kind of active. Like this is not a, like there is pharmacological action happening here. For a little bit, I was microdosing LSD, and actually really loved it. It was actually some of the best days I've had, and I like didn't feel high, but I'm like, I know I had a microdose earlier, so I'm like thinking about it quite regularly. I don't know why I'm not doing it anymore, but it's yeah. I would love to remember my dosing. I think it was like 10 to 13 micrograms, roughly.
Well, how could you know if you don't know the LSD blotter?
Yeah, right. Roughly.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah. So, I think, once I can buy my LSD from Walmart, I'll know for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, when we're thinking about like other variables there, I'm just even thinking that recent study that was just released. Actually, the minority was LSD microdosing, and majority was psilocybin microdosing. But then also, what happens when you start to stack that, right? So psilocybin plus lion's mane plus, what other functional, mushrooms that you're using there. And so, I think there are a lot of variables here as well. Is it the stack that you're actually using that's helping and improving?
Right. Yeah. Like the Paul Stamets stack has a whole bunch of stuff in it. And, like niacin does some really interesting things. The other compounds do really interesting things. And you're doing this thing daily for a while. Like I think it's something like 5 days on. Yeah. And, let's talk about before we get into negative possibilities, let's talk about like other possible things that could be getting helped, right? I've got a really strong interest in DMT and 5-MeO DMT microdose inhalations for traumatic brain injury. I think there could be some really interesting stuff there. And imagine
there's a company doing that, right?
Finally, I don't know. Like I know Daniel Carcillo is doing some stuff around TBI, but I'm not sure if they're talking like inhaled 5-MeO or DMT. Like if we look at the Navy SEAL population, they love 5-MeO DMT, and I think there's something around brain injury there. From all the subconcussive trauma, fighting, whatever else, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that company. I listened to a podcast a while ago, but I think it was like kind of microdosed DMT for like stroke victims.
I remember that. Oh, they got a cool name. It's like the mouse. Uh, it's one of these books that everybody read in high school in the States, like Letters to Angel. Ugh, man. Maybe somebody will remember it eventually. But it's
Algenon
a really cool
pharmaceuticals.
There it is. Yeah, Algenon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Algenon,
It's like a reference to some sort of like classic-ish literature in the States. I think I could be quite wrong. So I pulled it up. It's derived from the Old French. Algenon is uncommon as a baby name for boys, listed as top outside of the top 1,000 names. Well, that's interesting. So it's a name versus a word. That's interesting. Yeah. So maybe they just chose a really rare word. I don't know. I think there's more to the story than that. Baby names.
But that's a really interesting use case.
Yeah, right? Like there's so many use cases left to explore. I think this is one of the reasons I get so frustrated when people are so angry at business here. It's like there's so much money that needs to be allocated because the feds aren't helping us. And even if the feds did help us, they might not help us enough. This capital coming from private individuals and groups is going to accelerate the scale at which we can treat people with these compounds for indications that we don't even maybe know yet are good candidates, right?
Yeah, are they going to throw funds at trying to treat stroke victims with small microdoses of DMT? Probably not. Maybe more people in the private sector are going to do that because they might find it fascinating.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's like sexy to investors, so investors are going to throw some cash at it. And I didn't know this. I just learned this recently, but like cocaine, like people who are very fond of cocaine regularly have strokes, in middle age or later. I heard this word of mouth. I don't have any data whatsoever, but these are from directly from cocaine users I'm friends with. They're like, oh yeah, strokes. Like that's a big deal. And that's a cocaine thing often. It could just be like so much blood pressure, like high blood pressure for so long. But,
I know somebody that was doing a lot of cocaine who had 2 strokes back to back, but there's some other variables there at play with, I think, like a cavity that could have been infected, and then that infection went to the brain. They didn't notice it because they were doing a bunch of coke.
Oh my God.
I don't know. It's could have been the infection, not necessarily the cocaine use, but
yeah. That's wild. Yeah. So, we got to watch these things. Alcohol probably still more dangerous than cocaine. Hate to say it out loud, but if we refer back to the David Nutt harm scale, it seems to be true according to his data, peer-reviewed data. So, yeah, I've had some conversations recently with people in the psychedelic scene getting drug shamed for still being a cocaine user. I'm like, I only think it's a bad drug on account of the amount of blood behind it. I don't necessarily think people should get shamed for the drug itself. Yeah, and the ecological impact, plus like the blood in the supply chain. Those are the ugliest things to me.
Yeah.
Not to mention you might be helping fund the CIA's ops. So carefully consider that. maybe they're doing it for our good. I don't know.
Yeah. Back to microdosing, though. Your original question was like kind of other use cases with microdosing, and so maybe possible microdosing DMT, 5-MeO DMT. We were on the stroke thing. I wonder too about like microdosing and pain. Have you heard of anybody kind of getting?
Well, Fadiman talked about shingles, so microdosing mid shingles outbreak, and that mitigating a lot of the pain. Because it is nerve pain. It's literally an infection on your nerves, from what I understand, and your nerves can go fucking crazy. Somebody I'm quite close to had shingles, I think in the spring or summer, and it was one of the worst things I've ever seen. And if we had known that, we would have tried. somebody I know right now has shingles, and I was about to suggest they try it, but I'm like, I don't really know this person well enough to be making that kind of suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. There's
What about the interesting COVID use case with the smell, right? I've heard multiple people
Right.
kind of talk about, I don't know if it was specifically microdoses or a little bit larger doses, but yeah, really interesting reports there around people using psychedelics and kind of getting their smell back after getting COVID.
Right. So there's so many ways in which that could be like, well, I don't know enough about neurology, but here's my slappy attempt at trying to explain that. So nerves get damaged often in COVID infections, and the transmission of signal to like brain region gets interrupted, right? There's not enough signal flow going through that damaged nerve tissue, if that's what's happening. And perhaps psychedelic exposure either, number one, regrows those nerves, because we've seen neurogenesis quite a bit, or it amplifies the signal, kind of like if you've got two wires here and you got like a dial, like if you turn the current up enough, the electricity can jump that gap. Similarly in nerves, like if you boost the signal like crazy, it could jump that gap and hopefully kind of learn how to do that over time in better and better ways, right? So those are the two ways I model it as being possibly applicable. But yeah, I'm thinking bigger doses, honestly, but who knows? It's okay to start small. There's no risk. It's safer to start small always.
Yeah.
Again, not medical advice. This is just highly theoretical. If you heard how I describe my understanding of neuroscience, like you'll hopefully understand that this is speculation at its finest.
Another kind of theory or idea that just popped in my head, just talking about going small and maybe the benefits of that. I think about weaving in somatic psychology here and thinking about this concept of, I bring this up when we talk about going slow and titration around this thing. I think it was Peter Levine that mentioned this, that a lot of the early kind of somatic experiential techniques that came out of Esalen, they were calling them quote unquote primal therapies, holotropic breath work, Gestalt, etc. They were sometimes would blow people out a little bit from their nervous system, and just thinking about, the potential benefits of doing multiple small doses over time and thinking about, a trauma informed approach of, taking smaller actions at approaching trauma, titrating the experience, and could there actually be benefit of, using psychedelics in these lower doses or perceptual doses to maybe work on some things. And we're thinking about neuroplasticity over time, creating these smaller changes with a little bit of the help with the psychedelics, and creating maybe, long lasting change versus, blowing your nervous system out by going into, a realm you weren't really prepared for. And I know I've been there in the past of like, whoa. And then it took me years to integrate that and ground it and feel like, safety within the nervous system again. So, I don't know, just an idea that just popped in my head around, the potential use cases here with microdosing or maybe smaller doses and, why it's also maybe, appealing to a lot of people, right? And I think that's why it's really caught on. It doesn't feel as scary for a lot of people to have, a full-blown psychedelic experience. And if they are kind of pairing that up with, things that are helpful, again, journaling, like they're creating some sort of routine around it to create hopefully new neural pathways. Is there a longer-term benefit there for people? I don't know.
I think we have to thank microdosing quite a bit for where we are in psychedelics today.
Totally. Yeah.
No pun intended there. And so you can now break the law, microdose, and not have a scary experience. And there's a theoretical chance that you're going to have some sort of benefit from it. So it's like a really interesting, easy gateway. It's sexy still because it's illegal. There's a lot going on here.
How many microdosing companies pitched at Wonderland?
Oh my God.
So many.
Like it's fascinating to me. I love the idea of this. I love the idea of a nice, regulated, safe supply. I can throw in a few quarters into the airport, like, vending machine in the bathroom and get a couple microdoses. Like, that's extraordinary. I don't think we're there yet, and probably a few more years, but it's gonna be a really interesting inclusion and process. I don't know. I think that this will be marketed so hard that we're not necessarily going to have good, clear clinical evidence yet for what it does and why we would want to use it before these things are sold at scale, just based on how much attention I've been seeing go into it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if in California there's ready access late next year to a safe supply of microdose products, if not full-on products. Surprised, is that the right word? We'll see. But I want to talk about the negatives. So let's talk about like negative possibilities here, right? So there's drug interactions, there's increases in anxiety that could happen. You accidentally took that pill, you thought it was a micro and it was a macro, and now you have to like do a presentation at work or something or at school. You're like, uh-oh. Like, okay, so people could theoretically take more than they want, which I'll call an overdose. You overdose on where you wanted to be. I'm trying to reframe overdosing a little bit personally here. Like, not all overdosing means you need medical attention. It's just a whole ball of wax that we need to unpack.
Took too much.
Yeah, you took more than you wanted to, and that's fine. Like, I had more coffee than I wanted to. Whoops, yet again. I call my acid overdose an overdose, and it was me being a dummy. Not super mad about it, but it was, certainly what I would still classify as an overdose. I didn't realize one of the guys that was with me spilled it all over his hands and licked it up.
Jeez.
He still hasn't talked about it yet, but I think it helped him a lot. Yeah. What else can happen? Like, there are possible drug interactions, right? Depending on what substances you're using, there's all sorts of nuances that you need to dig into around how do these other things interact with the body. Like, if you're doing pure ayahuasca vine, are you exposing yourself to more MAOIs than is maybe healthy? Like, I don't have a good answer on that. But maybe microdosing cannabis, like, probably paranoia is the worst. Like, and a little bit of stress. If you go over. Actually really fucking love like small nibbles of cannabis throughout the day. I
do too. That's pretty much my thing. Like, get little small doses.
That explains it. All right. I need to do it more often. Typically I'm only consuming at night, but what else?
I typically save it for nighttime. But that's how I like, just small doses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my dosing's getting a little too high. I think I need a tolerance break for a little bit here. It's gonna bankrupt me. So what else can happen? So, like, if you're consuming drugs like this and there's a drug test that can test for these and your employer tests you for them, then perhaps you could get in some trouble there or lose your gig. It's probably most common with cannabis. Everything else is not too great. I have heard of people trying to microdose MDMA. I think that's a horrible idea. Why? I think just chronic administration of MDMA is problematic. We can eat Adderall every day and most people are healthy and fine, but MDMA seems to have like extra going on there.
A little bit of possible neurotoxicity, right?
Possibly. I remember talking to a therapist in Denver who had a client, and they were their client was consuming MDMA every single day, and for months, if not years, and wreaking havoc in their lives. So, we've got a lot of drugs available to us in this day and age, and we owe it to ourselves to be smart about what we're consuming and understanding the risk profiles and, what are the cost-benefit analysis of these things. And often doctors don't really walk us through that cost benefit analysis, right? Or risk ratios.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, yeah, here's your
Yeah.
thing. Peace. Yeah. Paxil. See you
One
later.
Yeah. One thing that popped in my head, and again, this is kind of hypothetical. I don't know too many people that have experienced this, but just thinking, if people are kind of consuming this, maybe they are kind of hitting that threshold dose most of the time. They're having some sort of effect of the substance, like getting into that topic of like bypassing, and what type of decisions are you making, right? Like, do you feel like you're flowing all the time and then actually not making the best decisions in your life? I mean, that's so subjective, and we're always in daily life when you're not on any substances, probably making poor decisions here and there. But just that idea of like possible psychological or type of that spiritual bypassing, if you're constantly in those states, like are you really thinking like clearly all the time? Maybe not. I don't know. Just something that kind of popped in my head with overuse with substances. It is nice to take breaks and get some grounding from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I regularly advise people take a break. It's okay. It's gonna be there when you're ready to come back, and you can get your shit together for a little while. It's okay. Like the DMT elves are gonna be just fine if you're gone, people. And this is possibly where knowing the history is good too. Like in the Tim Leary era, they tried to okay, what if we can stay high 24/7 forever? Turns out you can't. And so, Ram Dass
came down.
Yeah, they finally came down. Theoretically, if you have that DMTX backpack just constantly infusing you, maybe. But it's like there's probably going to be some interesting problems there. And that's why Ram Dass went in this interesting spiritual direction, or one of the reasons why Ram Dass went in this interesting spiritual direction. It's like, okay, like maybe that psychedelic path isn't complete yet. If people are doing the spiritual thing, but there's people doing medical things. There's people just, trying to escape and get high. Like, it's fine. Like, I'm okay if you're escaping to get high, but,
I definitely had my fair share of escapism when I was younger.
Right? Yeah. Like most of mine, unfortunately, was with booze and cannabis, but I kind of wish I spent a lot of my 20s on acid, but oh well. Here's to wishing. I probably wouldn't not be here right now if that was the case. But yeah, it's a whole like have you seen any good results like with people from microdosing or bad results?
There are I've chatted with people where they've had increased anxiety, like they're already struggling with anxiety, and I don't know if it's just getting their dosing down or what, but having to stop microdosing because they felt actually more anxious. And when I think about it from like that energetic perspective, like maybe activating energy when it really needs to be grounded a little bit more, and so that's a possible risk. But some of the folks that I chat with, really positive results for the most part. And, I do get clients and just people reaching out asking about it. And, I really just try to look at the research and see what the research is saying when I'm talking about that. But, I always come back to also this notion that, okay, we could say that it's placebo, right? But on the other hand, if it's working for somebody, like I think that's great. And if it's not harming their life and it's not, creating an extra layer of stress in their life, if it works, it works. And I think that it can be helpful for people, right? And so I don't know, when I hear the placebo thing and that being a negative thing, I pull back and say, well, hey, it's working, and I think that's great for people. So,
right. Let's compare risks. Like, compare the risks of Paxil to microdose psilocybin. Like, no contest. Yeah, I don't know. Like, that's a dangerous talk track for somebody holding a license to jump into. But, do your own analysis here, and what do you come up with? Yeah. That the scariest thing for me around SSRIs is that increased bump in suicidality when people are withdrawing. are trying to stop. Other than
Withdrawal
that,
is not fun. No, I mean, people have a really, really hard time with it.
yeah, like I'm
So
thinking
if you're
about how you say, "Are you ready for your life to get a little worse for a while, a little bumpier for a while?" I wonder if we need to say that around Paxil, like a SSRI withdrawal or basic psych med withdrawal.
if you are going that route, please find a professional to support you through that.
Right. Like it's no joke how hard it is. It's no joke how seriously you should take it. Yeah. So a medical pro is your friend when you're trying to come off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. You thinking of anything else here on microdosing?
No, I mean, whenever I just think of microdosing and people ask me, right, it's the great debate, right? Does it work? Is it placebo? What's going on here? Risks. And we could look at the self-blinded study that we recorded about and say, placebo did seem to have an effect on it. But again, I'm always coming back to just this idea of if it's working for somebody, like why always, I don't know, be negative about it and need to put it down. If people are finding healing and benefit in it and it's not causing any sort of disruption in their life, hey, cool.
Yeah.
But I guess it is helpful to have that research, right, to see actually what's going on. And I think it is going to be exciting if more institutions and research centers pick this up and get funding to do some cool stuff outside of citizen science. I think citizen science is definitely important, right? Helps to collect data and also kind of get some, real world data there, but it's also pretty self-selected, and there might be some bias there. Like I'm just reading through that study that I mentioned, and yeah, I mean a lot of the people that did the study are obviously favorable towards psychedelic use, and so are they just responding in favor of it, and that's something to take into consideration. So would be good to get some possible double blind research around this and get some other results.
Agreed. And there's so much left to do, and this is probably cheaper science to do than a lot of other things, right? So like if you're doing a full-on psilocybin trial, the requirements are pretty big relative to a microdose trial. I think that's my observation. Cool. So, kind of have an interesting tangent here, and I didn't prep you for this one. So, as you know, Kyle, and maybe some of the listeners know, I've had chronic pain and a ton of injuries for years and years and years now. Effectively, I can't do most of the things I'd love to do. For the most part, I'm in pretty low pain. Just the other day, I said something along the lines of, "I cannot believe how little my body hurts right now." I'm just sitting there, like I don't know, watching something stupid on Netflix, and I turned to my girlfriend and said that. I'm like, that's a really big deal for me because I've been in so much pain for so long. One of the people I was following to try to get out of pain was this person called Kelly Starrett. He got pretty famous for this book called The Supple Leopard. I can't really speak to the quality of it. I'm not advising anybody to buy it. I think the theory and science around this stuff has come a long way since that was published. But he made this post on his Instagram the other day, the company Instagram, called The Ready State. And I want you to respond to this, Kyle. This is in regards to physical therapists, but I think there's some overflow here, right? So I'm going to start it now. And this was published just yesterday, December 14.
Oh, cool.
Okay, here we go. You have to admit it's kind of a sweet business model. Near infinite people coming in to see you from the system. You don't really have to account for failed physical therapy outcomes. People won't fire you if they don't get results. They will just stop coming, and they ran out of visits anyway. This could be a big differentiator here. Referring doctors don't even know what you do, really. And the patient doesn't really have to pay that much for a copay. So no harm, no foul, right? you get to charge insurance like $600 for an ultrasound and some photocopies of stick figures, and of post. So I think you know where I'm going here, but this is just kind of a general commentary on physical therapy. But how does this relate to psychotherapy and mental health professions generally, right? I think there's some overflow here.
Yeah, I think there's that like big debate of, and I don't know if we chatted about this on the podcast before in other conversations, but what is like what's a good outcome for people with mental health, right?
Get back to work. Is that enough?
Yeah, but sometimes that is an outcome for some people that are really, really struggling, right? But then they get functional, they're able to do their job, but they're still struggling, right? And so, that process can go on forever, right? Like, if you take insurance, maybe the insurance company is telling you how many sessions, the client can have, and et cetera, et cetera. But, thinking about long-term ongoing therapy, yeah, when does that end, right? People are always going to maybe want somebody to support them or have somebody to, chat with. And, I think that it's an interesting topic. Like, what does good mental health outcomes look like for a lot of people? Because what are your goals? Very subjective. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a line on Star Trek last night, Deep Space Nine, for those who are curious how much of a nerd I am. But the line was, treason, like beauty, dear sir, is in the eyes of the beholder. Yeah. So like we have outcomes. They're in the eye of the beholder. Like you as a professional might have a very different perspective from the client or the client's family, right? And friends. Yeah. Like, can you get, and if you look at it like surgical recovery with physical therapy, they have really strict guidelines around what is progress. So right. Are you walking? How much pain are you in as you're walking? Can you walk for more than 5 minutes a day without being in pain? And we can make correlates here to mental health, right? Like, can you make it half a day without, your prescribed benzo? Can you make it to lunch without it? Or, we can look at substance use disorder or various addiction profiles. Like, can you make it to 8 p.m. without a beer? Or how many days in a row? Like if you look back at the Peter Hendricks episode we did, he's from University of Alabama doing cocaine and psilocybin research. They're not looking at abstinence. They're looking at, is your safety and lifestyle improved? Are you using less cocaine? That's the metric.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's awesome, right? Like, people feel so much shame if they can't win, right? Like, if I can't become like a Fortune 500 CEO, I'm worthless, right? Like, that's a ridiculous goal for most people to have. But are you a little nicer to your dog? Can you get through your workday? Like, do you think you can handle the next year of your life without having to check back into a facility?
Right. Yeah.
Are there metrics that you guys in the profession think about?
I'm just thinking about like the various like, places that I've worked, when I'm thinking about, there's different metrics for different things. I mean, when I worked in like crisis stabilization, right? Like for those that came in that are having severe suicidal ideation, who can't cope, we obviously want to stabilize them. And the metric there is this person stable? Is their kind of suicidal ideation still very severe? Do they have coping skills? How are they tolerating any sort of stress in their life? And so, when I worked in that, it's really just based on that stabilization. Okay, somebody's stable, boom, you're out of the program, right? When I'm doing therapy with people, we're creating goals. Sometimes people meet the goals, and then I'm always checking in with them and saying, hey, is this working? Do we want to, you met this goal of originally why you came in here. Does this feel like we need to end therapy, or, do you continue to want to go on? And sometimes it's, now I have a new goal, right? Or, hey, this other thing's starting to bother me. So, with some of my clients, I'm like, okay, we have goals that we're trying to reach towards, and we're always trying to work towards that. And then once they get there, something new comes up. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I think what is that metric in more kind of like when I'm not doing crisis stabilization in a certain place where that's okay, we're looking at that and we need to work towards that, versus more kind of long ongoing therapy when, things are just constantly shifting and changing. You met the goal and okay. And I don't, I'm not operating under the insurance panel, so I'm not having to, maybe meet the metrics that the insurance companies want to meet. So yeah, I think it just looks a little bit different from that perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Yeah, because there's going to be a lot of nuance here, right? Like if we bring it back to the physical, shoulder surgery and a procedure on your finger, like very different looks, right? Both can be equally as painful for sure. Yeah, circling back to microdosing because of the finger now. So the Paul Stamets stack allegedly, allegedly, I don't have any evidence. I don't know that Stamets does either. Niacin improves or increases dilation of blood vessels. And his theory, his operating theory, he presented all this at 2017 MAPS in Oakland that I can't stop talking about lately for some reason. The idea is that even on like a finger injury, if you have like nerve damage down to very fine areas where some molecules might not be able to make it there, perhaps niacin can dilate that to the point where you can get those molecules and do some good down there. I believe they're including lion's mane and psilocybin in there. I recall seeing a patent that he filed that included CBD as well, which is interesting, separate from the traditional stack. But is it possible that microdosing and using something like the Stamets stack could improve nerve health and function on your very final extremities? Like thinking about all this stuff, the ads we've been doing for Mind Cure a little bit here, I'm wondering about sexual dysfunction too. Like, is there an interesting thing going on here around sexuality, human sexuality? Like, probably, I'm going to say. I don't know, but I think so. There's so many avenues, and we could get into the religious angles. Like I talked about the pine needles, like you're developing a relationship with the mushroom or with LSD or whatever it is, in whatever kind of shamanic frame you want to put it in. Perhaps there's probably other ways of doing that too.
Yeah. So going back to that quote that you read too, like what was some of the things that you were thinking about with that as well?
I just want people who are providing these services to be aware of how they might be perceived. I want people to lean towards figuring out ways of continually improving their patient outcomes. The point there was that some physical therapists don't give a shit. They're just cleaning up. Right. Is that the case also with some MDs and some therapists? For sure. But there's plenty that care. There's plenty that care so much that they're like dedicating their lives to improving their profession as a whole.
Yeah. I always tell my clients, like, my whole goal is I don't want to see you again, right? Like, I don't want to keep you for this long of time just to do it, because at what point does it not become very productive? And I think the way that I approach therapy is really helping people develop those skills and that toolkit so that they don't always need support, right? They're bringing into their world, we're talking about really integration at this point. Really learning those skills to then go out into the world and find regulation in their nervous system, so they don't always need to come back. And of course, it's a roller coaster. We're gonna have times when we need help. We're gonna not have time when we need help, and we're gonna be really self-sufficient. But yeah, I mean, that's the way I approach it. It's like, and I don't know, I've always worked in like kind of short-term places, so moving more into like longer term therapy, it's like, okay, yeah, like, when does this end for you? Like, I've always been in those settings where it's like, we have a set amount of time, we need to meet these goals, and then get out, and then new people come in. But yeah, moving more into longer form therapy, I'm like, yeah, this could just keep going on and on. But is that always helpful? I don't think so. right? Because then it's like, are you actually going out and making changes in your life and actually integrating what you're learning in here?
I remember that guy in Jamaica saying, I just want to be with people. Like, I'm done working on myself. I'm too old to just keep doing this ad nauseum. Isn't it okay that I just have some pleasure right now and be with these people? Like, that's, long and short of what was conveyed there. And
Right.
I'm kind of reminded of our conversation yesterday, Kyle, about, length of treatment. So like, Freud, 20 years was kind of standard, I think. Like, probably not exactly that, but, he wanted to be with clients for a very long period of time. Marginal results. Similarly, I think Jung maybe had better results. I don't really know the data or if data was even a thing at that point. But the idea of psychoanalysis and being in forever, as opposed to how can we resource this person, give them tools and make them kick ass at life so they don't have to keep paying money and going to the office all the time, right? Or telehealthing in or whatever it is. Getting them functional enough so they feel cool enough to like do their jam. Yeah. And a lot of us in the scene are kind of utopians in that we want to see everybody functioning optimally. It's just not really a reasonable goal right now. We've got a lot of other things to worry about first before we as a culture and a science like get there. And then you commented on something that made me think about the complexity of healing and how many variables there are in mental health. That perhaps there's different variables in physical therapy that are in play.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Yeah. I think there's a little bit of crossover between the two. Because if you're actively having panic attacks 5 times daily, like your healing is probably not going to be great relative to somebody who's healthy and happy.
Well, I'm thinking about chronic pain. Like I suffer from chronic pain as well.
From your scars?
I think so. I've just always had a lot of different pain issues, and I think some of it might be kind of scar tissue adhesion related, the way it still kind of pulls on certain things. I mean, I started going to a physical therapist years ago, and they were like, "You never got this treated?" Like, it's like nobody had ever told me to work on it. I never went to physical therapy after my accident. I don't think the doctors ever told me. So they're like, "Oh yeah, this has just been sitting forever. No wonder why you're having issues." Sitting all day, like, I just have chronic pain all the time. I don't really talk about it, but it definitely affects my life. But, thinking, can I get through the day? What's my relationship to pain? If I am working on it, if it's always there and I'm able to show up and function, like, I think that's a pretty good measure of, okay, like maybe I'm getting better. Does it go away? Like, is there something physical there that maybe isn't completely going to heal? And there's always going to be some sort of inflammation or some sort of pain. And what's my relationship to that, right? How do I maybe find things to reduce that pain or inflammation from time to time? And okay, I can deal with this. So I don't know. I think about, does your relationship to pain change over time? And is that also, an indicator that you're healing? Like, it still might be there, but maybe it doesn't affect you as much on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's a whole ball of wax. It seems like you and I need to get Court Wing on again and just like grill him on pain. To figure this shit out for ourselves. Cool. Anything you want to close with here?
No, I think this is a fun conversation for today. So thank you for bringing up these topics.
Enlivening. I think we need to do it more. None of these half-hour Friday episodes.
Well, there's just a lot to think about in these topics, right?
Tons to unpack. And I hope you all like this loose exploratory style. There's a lot of critical thinking you all can bring to this as well. So don't just shut the door on microdosing. Understand that the thing is really complex. And we don't know much yet. But some people, it's fucking saving their lives, getting them off meds they don't want to be on. Like, literally, I recall this one thing of, when my girlfriend was selling pot on Main Street here, there were these patches, transdermals. And this guy was, after he started using these transdermals, his Parkinson's, like, shaking would slow down so much that he could hold his granddaughter.
Wow.
And, like, shit like that. So, like, massive amounts of applications for microdosing and different experimental delivery methods. So we've got a long way to go here, everybody. Like, we need to sit tight, think about how we can maximize the benefit to all people. Things are going to cost money. I wish everything could be free, but for now, things are going to cost money. So, hold on, and keep fighting for this gray black market stuff to become more available. Like, I don't want to have to go to MindMed for LSD. Like, I'm cool with them doing the research. I just, I would rather buy it from whoever, somebody else with a safe supply. Similarly with cannabis, I don't want to be forced into certain vendors. I want to have a lot of choice. I'm also okay with boutique home grows. Like, I think those are dope. Like, they're actually kind of a staple here. But yeah. Anyway, I think that's it for now. I know you got to run for your client. So if you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. If you want to develop your community around microdosing and have some interesting conversations next time you're hanging out with your microdosing friends, share this with them. Like and subscribe if you can. And again, January 6th, we kick off Navigating Psychedelics for clinicians and therapists. You can learn more at psychedelicstay.com. All right. So I think that's it. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And thank you, everybody.
And do it again in a few more days. Bye-bye.